Not like you thought. Maybe you thought Jacob was done, but it's not done. For 4 hours, David Page held the cylinder, and he was waiting for either rescue, which is what he hoped for, or immediate death, because David had unearthed a World War II bomb in Norfolk, England, and the 40-year-old held on to it because he was worried that if he put it down or if he moved too much, it might go off. And so he just held it. And he ended up calling emergency services, and he said to them, "Tell my family I love them." And the operator said back, "It's going to be okay, it's going to be okay." And he said, "You're not the one holding a bomb." And he waited and waited, and the first responders came and they gave distance, and they waited for the Army bomb disposal unit to arrive. And so finally, after quite a long time, they did arrive, and the drama ended abruptly when they discovered what the bomb was. It was the hydraulic suspension system of a Citroën car, which is a popular European car. How often does it turn out that the panicky fear was for nothing? Maybe the conversation you prepped in your head so long, it just didn't pan out the way you thought. Or the conflict or the confrontation. Maybe the bomb you were holding was really a car part. Nothing like how you thought it was going to be. And the same thing happens for Jacob. Sorry, my mic's a little weird here. The last time Jacob looked at his brother was threatening murder. And you'd think he'd have cooled off by now, but 20 years later, when Jacob sends the message that he's going home, he finds out from the scouts that Esau's coming to meet him with 400 men, an army. And so, terrified and panicked, Jacob separates his group into 2 camps, and he prays this prayer of desperation, and then he sends 550 animals out in groups, little herd gifts, to try to pacify his brother Esau and to atone for his transgressions. But in the night, Jacob encounters a man who leaps from the darkness, and they wrestle all night. And finally, close to morning, wrestling, the man wounds Jacob. He touches him on the hip and wounds him. But Jacob won't let go. And so he's holding on in desperation, or as Frederick Buckner says, he's in the grip of the drowning man. He just won't let go. And till finally the man blesses him, a blessing of grace. A new name, this name Israel, the one who wrestles with God and overcomes. And then Jacob says, "What's your name?" And the man says, "Why do you ask my name? You know it already." And then Jacob calls the place Peniel, face to face with God, and I live to tell about it. So limping, exhausted, changed, the dawn breaking, Jacob looks up, and here comes his brother with 400 men. This is our story this morning. Genesis 33. I lost my spot. Genesis 33. You can follow along on screen, or if you have your Bible with you. Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. But Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Then Esau looked up and saw the women and children. "Who are these with you?" he asked. Jacob answered, "These are the children God has graciously given your servant." Then the female servants and their children approached and bowed down. Next, Leah and her children came and bowed down. Last of all came Joseph and Rachel, and they too bowed down. Esau asked, "What's the meaning of all these herds and flocks I met?" "To find favor in your eyes, my lord," he said. But Esau said, "I already have plenty, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." "No, please," said Jacob. "If I have found favor in your eyes, accept this gift from me. For to see your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you've received me favorably. Please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need." And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. Then Esau said, "Let us be on our way. I'll accompany you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are tender, and I must care for the ewes and cows that are nursing their young. If they're driven hard just one day, all the animals will die. So let my Lord go on ahead of his servant while I move along slowly at the pace of the flocks and the herds before me and the pace of the children until I come to my Lord in Seir." Esau said, "Oh, then let me leave some of my men with you." "How, but why do that?" Jacob asked. "Just let me find favor in the eyes of my Lord." So that day Esau started on his way back to Seir. Jacob, however, went to Succoth, where he built a place for himself and made shelters for his livestock. That's why the place is called Succoth, which means shelter. After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. There he set up an altar and called it El Elohe Israel. This is God's word. Not like how you thought. My big idea this morning is that encountering God changes your whole life. Encountering God changes your whole life. And for Jacob, he is changed. He will be changed. He is changed. And the first thing we see is courage for fear. Courage for fear. There's a story about a guy named Ray Blankenship, and he lived in Andover, Ohio. And one morning he was sitting at his breakfast table looking outside into his front yard, and he had in his yard a very big ditch, like a culvert that filled with flowing water whenever there was a storm. And this particular time it was rushing like a river through his yard. And as he looked out, he saw a little girl being taken by the torrent, and he jumped up and he ran outside and he started sprinting down the road because he knew that at the end of his street that river went underground into a culvert. And so he sprinted down the road, and then at a certain point he jumped in and grabbed the girl, and they were carried along, and just feet before it goes underground he managed to grab hold of a rock, and he held onto the rock and the girl in the streaming torrent until the firemen arrived. And before they arrived, he managed to pull them both onto the bank. Ray received the Coast Guard life-saving silver medal, not just because he saved the girl, but because Ray doesn't know how to swim. What we all hope most is that in our moment of greatest fear, that we would find courage. It is what we hope. And Jacob, as he limps out of this God-wrestling encounter and a sleepless night, he looks up in verse 1. He lifted up his eyes, or he looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400. Esau whom he had tricked and traded. Esau with a sword and bow. Esau with a grudge. Jacob has a household of women and children and sheep. Edom is coming with a mounted regiment. But what better day to see it than the morning after you've wrestled with God? Jacob has been face to face with Yahweh, and you see things differently when you've been face to face with God. Reminded me of a story from 2 Kings chapter 6. It's a story about Elisha, who's a prophet in Israel, and there's the king of Aram, and he's been setting ambushes for the people of Israel, and every time they seem to know what he's doing. And so he's frustrated, and he says to his guys, "I think we have a spy. Someone's spying, telling them." And the guys say, "No, it's not a spy. It's Elisha. He keeps telling them what we're doing." Like, it's his, he's the prophet. And so the king says, well, let's kill that guy. What are we doing? Like, let's go. And so he sends his army, and they go and surround the city. Elisha's in Dothan, and they wake up in the morning. So in the night, they surround the city. They wake up in the morning, and the city is surrounded by an army. And his servant is just beside himself. We're going to die. We're going to die. And they go up on the wall, and they look at this army surrounding them. We're going to die. We're going to die. And Elisha says, don't be afraid. He says, those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And the servant must have given him a look like, what are you talking about? Are you insane? Like, can you not see these people? Our army's not even here. And then Elisha prays, open his eyes, Yahweh, so he can see. And then Yahweh opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills filled with horses and chariots of fire surrounding Elisha. But actually, the story doesn't end there. It actually is a grace story. Elisha prays that God would blind the army, and he does. And so Elisha goes out into the army, and he leads the blind army into the city. They disarm them, and then their sight is restored, and they're surrounded and in the city. And the king says, should we kill them now? And Elisha says, no. I want you to throw a feast. Throw a feast. And they do. They all eat together at this feast. And then they send them home unharmed. And they don't set ambushes anymore. It's a good story. Lift up your eyes, Jacob. What do you see? Lift up your eyes, South Abbotsford. Grace is coming. This is a common expression. It's used a lot of times in the Old Testament. In the Psalms, Psalm 123, to you I lift up my eyes, O you who are enthroned in the heavens. Psalm 121, verses 1 to 2, I lift up my eyes to the hills. Maybe this one, you know. From where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, Yahweh, who made heaven and earth. See, Jacob has found the fear of Yahweh. He now lifts up his eyes to what once terrified him, and now it's different. He doesn't seem afraid. In fact, he seems like the encounter has changed him, and he's filled with courage. So he lines up his family in this procession in the order of favoritism, so that doesn't change. But now finally, Jacob's willing to go first. He's going to go in front of everyone, and he's going to stand there while his brother and 400 mounted men ride up. That's going to take courage to do that. How do you do that? The answer is the courage comes when you know who is with you and who you are. Who's with you and who you are. It reminds me actually of another story in the Old Testament. 1 Samuel 17, of a boy standing in front of a giant across the battlefield, standing weirdly with courage. Why? How? How does David stand across from Goliath when no one else would? Every day Goliath comes out and he taunts the people of Israel, and he taunts their God. Come and fight me. Who will fight me? No one will do it. Until finally this boy comes out. And there's a reason why, because Goliath is an expert in one-on-one combat. He's a champion. This is what he does, is take down people. And he's still alive, so he's obviously very successful. And he's very big. His javelin's like a weaver's rod. Like, this guy is scary. And he stands there and he looks across and he starts laughing. Is there no man in Israel? You send me a boy. Or you're going to come at me, I'm a dog, you come at me with your stick. David doesn't even have a sword. Come and I will feed you to the birds of the air, he says. David's like, oh yeah? And for some reason, he seems to be able to see something different than what's actually here. He says, oh, you come at me with a sword and a spear. I come at you in the name of the Lord who is God. And today I'm going to end up cutting off your head. Sorry, buddy. Even though he doesn't even have a sword, what is he talking about? And then David does this unthinkable thing. He starts running toward Goliath. Like, that kind of epic courage comes because he sees something else. It comes from knowing who is with you, and it comes from knowing who you are, like your new name. And still Jacob will bow. He'll bow 7 times, and there's some proverbs about this. The bullet flies over him that stoops is one, or the Bible proverb, chapter 15, verse 1, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Or Matthew Henry says, many preserve themselves by humbling themselves. Or the famous philosopher Indiana Jones says, only the penitent man shall pass. That was in my head for some reason. Jacob is he's wise enough to know that even though God is with you, humility helps. It would be a good lesson for us to learn that courage pairs well with humility. And then it turns out the bomb is just a car part. His brother's not mad. In fact, he runs to meet him. This is unusual. Men don't usually run in ancient Middle East. It's just not dignified for them to do it. And yet Jesus tells a story too about a running father who runs to meet his prodigal son, runs to meet him and then embraces him and weeps and kisses him. And we call it grace or redemption. And when Esau runs to Jacob, it's grace. And when he embraces him and kisses him, it's grace. Jacob says in verse 11, God has been gracious to me. Courage, grace, humility, these are the outcome of encounter with a living God. And we're given grace to bless. Grace to bless. I told you last summer how we were planning to move. I got this job last January, and then we said, I'm going to commute for a little bit, and in the summer we'll move, and then our family will start life in Abbotsford in September. And so our kids were signed up for school in Abbotsford in September, and Lauren gave up her job in Maple Ridge and took a job with the District of Abbotsford for September. And then things kind of went off the rails. Lauren's dad died, and then our deal fell through on our house, and the deal that we had made fell through, all of it. And the economy tanked. House prices started going down. I even read an article that was like, do not sell your house right now. Like, I have to sell my house right now. This is the plan. And then our house wouldn't sell. We kept dropping the price. It didn't seem to matter. And then I told you about the oil tank that they found in our front yard. And it was bad. It was really bad. It had leaked, and the soil removal and remediation cost $60,000. Just was like one thing after another. And they had to tear down the tree that was in front of our house, the big old tree, and our old Rhodos, like a 100-year-old house. It was like, just painful. And so we moved into this temporary apartment in Abbotsford, and we moved in there in shock and grief, really. And our plans, our grand plans for buying a nicer house maybe than our old fixer-upper. It was like, maybe we'll be able to upgrade. Like, no. Our hopes just diminished with every price drop. It was like, oh my goodness, our buying power's gone. And I kept thinking of maybe we'll be the pastor with a home to host. And then it became like, maybe I'll be the pastor who lives in a shack. I don't know. This doesn't seem good. And God's commission to Abraham was, I blessed you to be a blessing. And when I'm in that situation, I'm thinking, it's easier said than done. It doesn't feel like I can be a blessing. And maybe we feel like a victim. Jacob's story could read like that. Jacob hasn't really been a blessing. He's struggled in his life. And if someone came up to him and asked him, hey, Jacob, how are you doing? It could read like this. Jacob could answer, I was born second and named heel grabber. Thanks, Mom. I'm unloved. My dad likes fresh game, but I'm not a hunter. I'm unappreciated. One time I tried to help out my brother when he was hungry. That didn't go well. Backfired. I'm misunderstood. Another time, I was just trying to get what's due me, and everyone freaked out. My brother trying to kill me. I had to go on the run with nothing. Life is so unfair. I got tricked into marrying the soft-eyed sister. My wives bicker nonstop, and I have 4 of them. I have 1 million kids. My boss is always trying to cheat me, and when I finally did quit and leave, my vindictive father-in-law chased me down with these made-up accusations of stuff I stole. Now finally my psycho brother knows where I am and he's bringing an army to kill me. I'm going to die. When you live your life as a victim, you never have enough. It doesn't matter who helps you or blesses you or comes alongside you or supports you. Nothing can contradict that deep, aching belief that the world is against you. Maybe you feel God is against you. Sometimes we spend our whole life so desperate to get the blessings that we forget we are called to be a blessing. And there comes a day where you cease to be the victim, where you stop being the oppressed, where you learn your real name, where you wrestle and overcome, where you are marked by grace. And this story is a grace story. When Esau asks, who are these people with you? He says, who are all these people? And Jacob can answer, they're the heritage of the Lord. They're the lineage of promise. I have enough. Or Esau says, well, what's with all this stuff you sent? It's so weird. And Jacob will admit that he was looking for grace or favor from Esau. And the thing he thought up in desperation, he now offers freely. And Esau will refuse. And Israel will insist. Please accept the present that was brought to you, for God has been gracious to me, and I have all I need. And because Jacob insisted, Esau accepted it. And this is the great reversal, you guys. Jacob the taker, Jacob the blessing thief, Jacob the grace-starved victim has been face to face with God, and now he's different. Israel, the overcomer, the limping grace giver, finally becomes the blesser. He's finally giving. He finally has enough. What about for us? Our story too is a grace story, our house story. The undoing of our resources and our plans and our ability drove us to reconsider what we were going to do. And we looked at what we could buy and thought, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And we came back and revisited an idea about living together with Lauren's mom, because she had been talking about maybe moving out to Abbotsford. And so we talked more about this. Now it was different. The timing was different and the situation was different. And we decided that we were going to try this. And so we did find a home. And the house we found together is a grace home. Rooms for all the kids. It has a view of the valley and a covered deck with a hot tub, a private yard, and even, surprisingly, a pool. It maybe has the only flat driveway on Sumas Mountain for Gabe to play basketball on, I think. And I sat in the kitchen this week looking out over the cloud-covered mountains and the lush green valley, and I thought, this is not my house. It will never be my house. It is a gift of grace. It will always be His. When you come to the end of yourself and your way and your ability and your resources, when you encounter Jesus in surrender, you have enough. You know your name. 1 Peter 2:9-10 says, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of Him who called you out of darkness into His wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. If you've been marked by the grace of Jesus, you have enough to be a blessing. And Jacob is almost there, but not quite, because it's going so well until verse 12, when Esau says, let's be on our way. I'll accompany you. Like, Oh, it was going so good until that moment, right? And like, what excuses do you make? It's almost, but not quite. I have a list of a few excuses some parents have made that are almost there, but not quite. This is one. My son is under a doctor's care and should not take PE today. Please execute him. Or excuse him. Please excuse Lisa for being absent. She was sick and I had her shot. Or gave her shots or something, I don't know. Please excuse Roland from PE. Yesterday he fell out of a tree and misplaced his hip. We can't find it anywhere. It's disappeared. Chris will not be in school because he has an acre in his side. Hate those acres. Oh, it's really aches. Or please excuse Ray Friday from school. He has very loose vowels. I don't want to know what that one's supposed to be. Please excuse Jimmy for being... It was his father's fault. What excuse do you make? Jacob he's almost there. It's so close, but almost isn't quite close enough, is it? Like, picture, it would be like as if you're sitting with Genghis Khan in his tent and all of his warriors are around you. Like, he is at the mercy of Esau and this mounted troop. They've navigated the greeting, the welcome, check. Esau's met the family, check. They worked out the gift arrangement, check. No one has been killed yet. Double check. And now, how to politely decline the offer to move in together. Like, no, I do not want to move in with you, Esau. We're not doing that. Esau's going south. He's going to Seir. That's where he's from, to Edom, this land that he's kind of conquered and made a home in. It's about 161 kilometers south. And he's offering this full escort that Jacob would join him. But Jacob is on his way home to his inheritance, to Canaan, which is west. So Jacob sends Esau on his way. He, with polite regrets, this kind of back and forth a little bit. And then Jacob promptly turns west as soon as Esau's out of sight, right? He's like, I'm going the other way. And he heads west. Jacob has always known where he was going. He's going to the land promised him, to Bethel, back to Bethel, where he made the vow. And the vow was that he would come and make an altar there if God brought him back safely to this land. He's seen Yahweh. He's received the blessing face to face. He has a new name. All is well. This is like the happy ending of the story. Verses 18 to 20. After Jacob came from Paddan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver, he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of ground where he pitched his tent. And there he set up an altar, and he called it El Elohei Israel. So Jacob arrives safely. This is what he wanted all along. And then he buys some land, just like Abraham did. No longer this altar to the God of Abraham or the God of the fear of Isaac, but El Elohei Israel means God, the God of Israel, like the God of Jacob. He's claiming this God, and he set up this altar. If only that were the end of the story. If only he had gone to Bethel and not to Shechem. If only he hadn't set up his camp there. If only you don't turn the page. If only we stop. But that's not how life is it? The truth is we experience breakthrough and we have these moments, we get a new name, we find courage. Our lives are filled with gracious encounters and these mountaintop moments with God, and more mess to come. Failure and compromise and brokenness and sin is also part of the story. Ours and others. Evil committed by us and against us. There's no magic talisman that gets you out of it. We trust God and we follow Jesus, and we're on this journey here. I introduced these 3 words to our baptism class last week: justification, sanctification, glorification, and I called them the sound smart church words. I said, if you memorize these words and you go around and you just say them to people, you will sound very smart. Many of you might know those words, or at least you probably know what they mean, the meaning of it. Well, so justification is that we are made right before God once for all by the blood of Jesus. We are justified when we stand before God because of Jesus. And sanctification is that we are on this journey. We are being made more and more like Jesus as we go along. Every day, by the work of his Spirit alive in us, we're being changed slowly over a long time. And the last word, glorification, is that we're moving toward an end, toward a goal. That is that at the end of all things, or the end of our life, we will stand before the living God face to face. And on that day, we will be made whole, complete. We will be healed in every way, no longer experiencing this brokenness. But until then, we're in the journey. So some days I go back to the river and I just cling to Jesus. Frederick Buckner said it this way: Jacob will not release his grip, only now it's a grip not of violence, but of need, like the grip of a drowning man. The darkness has faded just enough so that for the first time he can dimly see his opponent's face. And what he sees is something more terrible than the face of death. The face of love. It is vast and strong, half ruined with suffering and fierce with joy. The face of man flees down all the darkness of his days until at last he cries out, I will not let you go until you bless me. Not a blessing he can have now by the strength of his cunning or the force of his will, but a blessing he can only have as a gift. This is grace. In conclusion, encountering God changes your whole life. Buckner goes on to write, God is the enemy whom Jacob wrestled in the river. Of course, and in one way or another, we all of us fight God, the beloved enemy. Our enemy, because before giving us everything, he demands of us everything. Before giving us life, he demands our life, ourselves, our will, our treasure. Will we give them, you and I? His question. Like Jacob, we're invited to encounter the living God. And if we're willing to be transformed by Jesus, we can experience unexpected courage. We can have grace to be a blessing, and also to know that this story is not at the end. There will be victory and setback. You will need more grace before the end. Let's pray. Jesus, this morning we do declare your unfailing love that drove you to come and to give your very self for us, to save us, to offer to us this grace that we cannot earn, we cannot make good on. It's just your gift. And this morning, Lord, we come recognizing that we're in deep need of an encounter with you. Some of us maybe have never walked in to have that encounter. We've resisted. Others maybe are clinging to you in desperation today, asking for you to move a blessing on their behalf. And Jesus, I thank you that you're here with deep and abiding love for us, that we can come without condemnation or fear. We can approach your throne and receive the grace we so long for. Thank you. Thank you for all you've done. Amen.